The empire's iron grip. Forget the snow and the gently lowing oxen. Forget the neat, sanitized drama of Christmas cards and children's pageants. The year 4 B.C.E. was not a time of peace on earth, but a time of global intimidation, suffocating taxation, and political terror. The world stage was dominated by a colossal, ruthless machine, the Roman Empire, which measured its success not by liberty, but by efficiency. In the tiny, defiant province of Judea, this dominance was managed by King Herod the Great, a brilliant, paranoid tyrant who ruled through constant fear. Herod had already executed his own wife, his mother-in-law, and 3 of his own sons to secure his shaky throne. Against this backdrop of systemic violence and military occupation, a simple, non-negotiable decree was issued from Rome, a census. This was not a demographic survey. It was a prelude to financial ruin, a cold calculation of how much gold could be squeezed from the occupied people. This story begins not with a whisper of angels, but with the grinding weight of Roman bureaucracy, forcing a penniless, heavily pregnant teenage girl and her terrified fiancé onto a dangerous road. This is the birth of Jesus Christ as it truly happened, a political crisis, a social scandal, and a terrifying act of defiance. Part 1. The World on Fire, Judea under Rome and Herod. The Calculus of Control, the Roman Census. The Nativity narrative is anchored in the administrative necessity of empire. The Gospel of Luke states plainly that Caesar Augustus issued a decree that all the world should be registered. Historians often debate the precise timing, but the essential truth remains. Registration was the tool of Roman power. It served 3 brutal purposes: conscription, land registry, and most importantly, taxation. For every Jewish citizen, this meant a burdensome return to their ancestral home. For Joseph, a tekton, a skilled builder and craftsman, not merely a rustic carpenter, meant leaving the established work of his Galilean town of Nazareth and traveling south to Bethlehem, the city of David. Nazareth itself was a village of no renown, nestled in the lower hills of Galilee. Later Jewish scholars and even Jesus' own contemporaries would view it with disdain. "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" was the common refrain. It was a place of obscurity. The journey was nearly 90 miles, 145 kilometers, over rugged, often unsafe terrain. It would have taken at least 4 to 7 days on foot, perhaps longer depending on the state of the roads and the need to rest. They were not tourists. They were economically compelled subjects, paying a toll for their subjection. The timing of their forced compliance, coinciding with Mary's final trimester, underscores the lack of choice and the desperation that defined this phase of the story. The shadow of Idumea, Herod, the architect of fear. To understand the fear permeating the atmosphere, one must understand Herod the Great. Appointed king of the Jews by the Roman Senate, Herod was ethnically Idumean, or Edomite, not Jewish. He was a deeply cultured man, a master of Hellenistic architecture, but he was pathologically obsessed with maintaining his power. Herod's rule was characterized by magnificent building projects, the vast expansion of the Temple Mount, the fortress of Masada, the port of Caesarea Maritima, and relentless savagery. The Jewish historian Josephus records numerous instances of Herod's paranoia. He executed the entire Sanhedrin, the Jewish council, who opposed him early in his reign. He had his beloved wife, the Hasmonean princess Mariamne, executed, along with her mother and brother. He orchestrated the murder of his 3 eldest sons, whom he suspected of treason, shortly before his own death. When the Magi later appear asking for a king of the Jews, Herod's reaction, to be troubled and all Jerusalem with him, is entirely rational. The city understood that a potential rival claimant meant only one thing: another purge. The peace in Judea was the fragile, terrifying peace of a volatile dictator's temporary contentment. Any perceived threat meant the swift, brutal application of force. The fever of expectation, the Messiah as a political savior. For the Jewish people living under this tyranny, the expectation of the Messiah, Hebrew Mashiach, anointed one, was a palpable political longing. They did not primarily anticipate a gentle spiritual teacher. They yearned for a new King David, a military, charismatic leader who would expel Rome, drive the pagan occupiers from the Holy Land, restore the throne, re-establish the independent sovereign kingdom of Israel, purify the temple, reform worship, and recenter the nation on God's law. When Joseph and Mary traveled, every prophecy associated with Bethlehem, the ancestral home of David, would have been loaded with this fierce political significance. To be a descendant of David, to travel to Bethlehem to be registered, and to be carrying a child foretold as Son of the Highest, was to be carrying a ticking political bomb. Part 2. The Scandal and the Sanctuary. The Virgin and the Scrutiny of Nazareth. The events preceding the journey were even more fraught with social danger. Mary, likely a young teenager, Jewish custom dictated betrothal often began around 12 or 13, was betrothed to Joseph. Betrothal was far more binding than a modern engagement. It was the first stage of marriage, requiring a formal divorce to dissolve. The Annunciation, the visit of the angel Gabriel, was terrifying, not just because of the supernatural encounter, but because of its cultural consequences. The angel promises her a son, Jesus, Yeshua, Yahweh is salvation, who will inherit the throne of his father David. Mary's logical question, "How can this be since I do not know a man?" reveals the immediate existential threat she faced. To be found pregnant while only betrothed was a crime under the law, punishable by death through stoning. She was quite literally a walking scandal. Joseph's comprehensive crisis. The burden of this secret fell entirely on Joseph. When he discovered Mary's pregnancy, his reaction, recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, is revealing. He was a righteous man and was unwilling to make her a public example. Under Jewish law, Joseph had 3 choices: public denouncement, accuse her openly, which would lead to a formal trial and likely execution; secret divorce, write her a private bill of divorce with 2 witnesses, dissolving the betrothal and saving her life but leaving her shamed and destitute; acceptance, proceed with the marriage and claim the child was his, enduring public suspicion for the rest of his life. Joseph's initial plan was the second, the compassionate middle ground. His decision to marry her, following a dream, was a momentous act of faith and civil courage. By taking Mary as his wife, he legally shielded her from the public consequences, but he could not shield himself from the gossip. He accepted the role of father to a child he knew was not his own, placing his reputation and livelihood at constant risk.